Welcome. I'm Pam Laricchia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Bea Mantovani. Hi, Bea.
Hi.
Hi. I have known Bea online in unschooling circles for quite a few years now, and she's actually even translated some of my blog posts into French, right?
Yes.
Yes. I really enjoyed the glimpses into their unschooling lives that she's shared both on her blog and on social media. And to get us started, Bea, can you share with us a bit about you and your family?
Yeah. So I'm Bea. It's short for Beatrice. And I'm from France. And my husband Tobias is from Germany, East Germany, actually. And we have two daughters, Linnea, who will be 13 in September, and Xenia, who is 9. And we now live in Quebec, in near Montreal in Quebec.
Oh, cool, cool. So, how did you discover unschooling, and what did your family's move to unschooling look like?
Well, I discovered unschooling when I was researching home birth, when I was pregnant with Linnea, my first daughter. So I think, well, I can't remember if I discovered unschooling or just homeschooling at that point. But
Mhm.
anyway, I was reading a book about alternative parenting, basically, and she went from like home birth to attachment parenting and then alternative schools, and then at the end there was homeschooling, like different methods of homeschooling, and at the end of that was unschooling.
Ah,
And so I thought about it a lot, like all of these appealed to me, and then and I kept on thinking and thinking, and then I had my baby and I kept on reading, and like I found unschooling Yahoo groups and Sandra's website and all that. And so, and like by the time my Linnea was 6 months old, I think I was sold. And so
sweet.
I was, and it took a while longer for my husband to be sold. But since she was 6 months old, she was a baby, and he was already sold on attachment parenting and all that, so that wasn't a problem. And then it kind of like the proof was in the pudding once I was doing the stuff, and she was growing up as a toddler, and we were doing lots of fun things, and my husband was like was became completely on board very quickly. But he's so yeah, at first he had a great experience in school. So he told me, well, why would you deprive her of school?
Yeah.
And but then when he saw that she was developing normally, she was very social and she was learning lots, then he's not somebody who again, he's somebody who's very confident, like self-confident, and I think like this extends to his children. So once he saw
Sweet. Yeah.
so once he saw that it was great and his children were speaking talking like normally, he was so now he's complete, like he's a huge advocate of unschooling too, even though he doesn't have like the theory as much as I do, because he doesn't like read as much as I do. I tend to read everything, and maybe too much even. But that's the way that I process things, is by researching and researching and researching. And so yeah, he's the big advocate, even though he doesn't like get the the theory as much. But so yeah, I didn't really like have trouble getting into it, because it evolved from from attachment
Right.
parent. And I
Attachment.
think my biggest problem was that like I was impatient, and I was like, okay, so when does the stage of them asking me questions start? And and I had to like pace myself, and I tend to be pretty impatient as a person too, and I had to be like, okay, it's normal. I can't expect results, and I can't expect them to like grow up faster than they are, and like everything will come. And but that was, and I started my blog really early, and at first it was just me like pondering how is it going to go, and am I doing the right thing and all of that. And then by the time she was 3, I was posting photos of what we were doing, and I felt
Mhm.
like, okay, now I'm really unschooling. Well, not really unschooling, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
Oh, that's so interesting. And, you make a really great point because that is part of deschooling, I think, isn't it? Is realizing how individual our children are. And when we're looking for things that we've heard about or we've read about, we have to get to kind of have to get to a point often where we those can become expectations, can't they? And we have to release those and see the actual child that's visibly living in front of us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually always a difficult part for me that I'm still deschooling on, is that like I read things and I have expectations. I mean, some of them are expectations from what I read, some of them are expectations from other, other tapes I have in my head. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one. And the other point that jumped out at me when you were talking about your husband's self-confidence, I think that's a cool observation, because that helped him to recognize, not only did he recognize what was going on like with his children, he was seeing that they were learning and talking and they were just like normal kids, right? But to have that self-confidence to be able to say, okay, this is going to work too, even though it goes against the grain, that might have been a big piece for him, was it?
Yeah, definitely. And he's like, and the great thing about this is that now I'm somebody who doubts, like who questions myself a lot, and he really tends to, in my opinion, sometimes not enough. But it's good because it's a balance, because he'll, when I question myself, then he'll come and tell me like, it's okay, she's doing okay. Like, you don't have to worry, it's going fine.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, like you said, he's more so of an advocate now, so he can balance you and help you talk through things. That's really helpful, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm really lucky that, I have him, and that we have very different personalities, because I think if I had had a husband like me who questions himself a lot, it would have been a lot harder in terms of deschooling.
Yeah, because you would have gotten each other caught in that spiral, that questioning spiral, right? And then it is harder to work your way out of it.
Yes, yeah.
One of the common questions that people have as they learn about unschooling is, but how will they learn how to read? Right? I have heard that really often, and can totally understand where they're coming from. Once they learn how to read, then I'll be able to fully unschool, right? So I'd love to
Yeah.
hear your perspective on the process of children learning to read, both, philosophically, and how it's playing out in your unschooling lives right now.
Okay. Well, so it's really interesting because um I was sold on, like, well, I have a brother who's slightly younger than me, and I read when I was in school, but I read very fast. When I was 6, I went into the equivalent of grade 1 in France, and within 2 months I was reading, and I was, reading novels at the back of the class while the other kids were like deciphering words.
Hmm.
But my brother um, uh, had a lot of trouble learning to read. He repeated second grade because he couldn't read enough, and then he really probably started reading when, like, fluently when he was around 10, I would say. So I had seen the damage that it did to him, and I think, like, because of that, his self-confidence is still like lower than it should be, because he's very intelligent, but I think he might be dyslexic because he has a lot of trouble spelling and stuff. But at the time, you know especially in France, like, people weren't diagnosed. And anyway, like, so I mean, but my mother was a teacher, so it's like she helped him and everything, and it still, like, didn't help. And it, and when he read, but, and like, so I had already that experience, and in my mind I was like, well, obviously, kids in school don't all read at the same time, and like
Yeah.
and it's, creates a lot of damage. So all that. But then, I read really fast, so, like, in theory I was all aboard, but like I kind of expected my children to read early, like me.
Yeah, yeah.
And then so up until my daughter, so Linnea, was around 7 or 8, I really, like, she wasn't reading and it didn't bother me and it was okay. But then it was started worrying me a little bit. But we so because Tobias is German and I'm French, and I speak to them in English, my kids. which is another topic.
Yeah, yeah, we'll get
later.
there.
But I was also, and people were telling me, like, I was like, well, you speak 3 languages, like, you read we read to them in all 3 languages, even though like mostly in English. So I was like, okay, fine. And then we moved a bit closer to my dad, and like when Linnea was 8, and he started finding out, because we don't see him. He doesn't live in Canada, so we don't see him very often. He found out that she wasn't reading, because she'd come and ask me, what does it say, what does it say, what does it say, multiple times. Like, it's not like I advertised it, but he figured it out. And she wasn't embarrassed about it, because to her it was normal. And so he was concerned, and so I explained it to him. And to my surprise, I was actually like, well, to my surprise, because I'm very nervous when I talk to my dad, I made a pretty articulate case of, like, it's not like I'm preventing her from reading. Like, I'm doing all the things that I should do, well, short of giving her lessons. But like, I read to her all the time, and like I answer her questions and whatever. And like, I've read lots of things and people. So he said, okay. And he like stopped asking me. But I think because of that, I got like nervous. And when we got back, when we got back to our house after the visit, I thought, well, maybe I need to give her information. So I sat her down and I started like showing her, ke ate is cat, and her ate is hat. But she didn't get it. It didn't make any sense to her. And I tried that for a few days, and like one day it just ended up, in tears. And I said, okay, that is not what I want to do. So I let it go. And then a year later, I went back to my dad's house, and like, I don't know what he said, but like when I got back to my house, I tried a little bit again. And same thing, I said, okay, never mind, let it go. And then we did some traveling. We were in Australia at the time, and then we went back to Canada. We like took a big trip, and in that time space, she figured out how to read, but not completely fluently, but she figured it out like enough that she could now, chat with her friends online and whatever. So I was like, well, that's awesome. But I had read a lot of places, a lot of examples of kids who got it, like, didn't read, and then they got it, and that was it. But she was like reading, but not fluently. And I don't know, again, it could be my expectations, and that were off. But anyway, like, I hadn't any examples of people who kids read late, and it still, and it clicked, but it didn't click all the way. And then it took them a while longer to figure it out. And that was hard. And it's still kind of hard for me, although now I've made my peace with it. But like, there was another time after that where I was like, because we're in Quebec and there were new regulations going on, and I was getting very nervous that I needed to show that I had tried something. Because by now she was 11. And she was 12. She was 12, and she was reading, but she wasn't reading fluently. And she was like, she loves novels, so I read to her a lot. Like, we read Harry Potter. We almost at the end of book 7. But she can't read, or she doesn't want to read that by herself. I don't know. I mean, I think if she wanted to, she could sit there, but it's better. And I admit I'd like it. I like, that we take the time and read together, like just before bed. Well, when like just before we go to sleep, we read together, and it's our like together time. And it's awesome. So I like, it's fine with me, but like, it's still, because of the, well, because I tend to worry and because of the political climate, I was like, I need to show something. So I signed us up for a while for like a program for dyslexics to but she agreed that like to try it, and it wasn't something that I forced or anything, but like the program was tedious, and I think it helped a little bit, and she did show some improvement, but after a while it really didn't work that well. after the first initial lessons. And then it was again like, sometimes it was frustrating for both of us, and then we left for France for 2 months, and like we said, okay, forget it, let's stop the program. So we stopped, and in the meantime, like while we were in France, but I think even before that, like in the meantime, when we weren't doing the lessons, because it didn't take very long, it was like an hour a week and then 15 minutes every day. She's really into drawing, and she was on DeviantArt, reading lots of things, and like there's these groups where you create characters, or like groups like that talk about characters, and like all this very detailed explanations of how your character has to look like, and it has to have prehensile tails and whatever. And like she was reading that, pretty much on her own by that time. So I was like, why do I have to make her practice reading stupid sentences, like so that she sees only when she's reading these things, even if she's not reading all the words correctly, like she's getting the information that she needs, and I don't need that. And then when we were in France, she was still doing her art thing, and she started writing short stories too, for her like as backstories for her characters, and like she started doing all these things that where I was like, well, I mean, I'll have proof anyway that she's writing. I don't need anything like else. So and now, since we came back from France, we've been back for about a month, she started reading Harry Potter to me sometimes. And like some days when she's tired, she stops at the words and has trouble figuring them out, but like she's pretty fluent, really. I mean, like, except for big words. And so that's that. But I don't know, I guess like it was and it still is some days like a hard thing for me, like something that I need to deschool more on, and that I found difficult to to not have anxiety about after, but not at the beginning. It was like because she read late, but because I tend to be an anxious person. Like I think anything like that would have made me anxious. Maybe like if it hadn't been reading, it could have been something else, I guess.
That's it. That is a great point. And I love that you shared that story in detail, right? Because, so often when I talk about, my kids' journey with reading, and, they were, my younger two were up 9, 10, 11, hitting 12 before they were, really fluent and comfortable with it at some points. But when you're sharing little snippets, you sometimes it doesn't come across all those moments when, like you said, when you guys, when expectations maybe came up for you, or even frustrations for the kids. You didn't really have that with Linnea, but, I remember, well, when Michael at some point would be like, I want to be able to read better. And there were moments, like you said too, it wasn't like an overnight completely fluent kind of thing. Because I remember there were times when I would sit with him and say, hey, can you read this? And he would read it fine. It was pointing out where he was on the journey for himself, because he wasn't like at the end. So for him, he was defining it as not reading. Yet there were so many steps along the way, like so many things he could read. And it was just saying, we didn't even have a conversation per se about the definition of reading, but it was like, oh, hey, but you can read that, or you can read that. So, to have such a great example of the whole journey, right? That it's not about us stepping back and not being involved and just waiting for them to do it. Maybe like you, some people and some people's brains are wired to just kind of pick it up early and off they go. But even like we were talking about right at the beginning, right? We're all individuals. We're all so different. And to see how our stories, even recognizing our own stories, how different they are from how it's going to work out with our kids, right? You said you understood that learning how to read is a whole process and you're totally okay with that. But, your story was still kind of what you were expecting your kids to experience, right?
Yeah. And also, I guess like there are two things. The first is people say, what do people say when they when they say reading? I know that school, they say they're reading, but they're not really reading. But I wonder, like, even in unschooling stories, like when people are saying they're reading, are they reading fluently, like every single words, or are they still words? And that's what I think, like, because I'm like, I like things that to be very precise. Like, I was like, but what do you mean he's reading? Like, and like, how does it compare? And I know, like that's also one of my biggest like deschooling points is that, like, I tend to compare too much.
Mm-hmm.
But does it mean that, like, they were done reading, like they were reading everything fluently, at like whatever age?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, like when were they reading, like I'm reading right now? Basically, what I mean?
One of the things that's so interesting, because Harry Potter played a big part in our kind of reading journey too, certainly with my daughter. And so when we first started unschooling that first year, I was reading Harry Potter to them like a lot. At the time, the first 4 books and the 5th book, I think, came out that year or whatever. And one of the fun things was when I'm reading it out loud, them seeing me struggle with some of the bigger and made up words and some of the, Latin based spells and all that kind of stuff. And even when we'd listen to the audiobooks, hearing how different people pronounce the words, right? And then reading articles where JK would explain how she pronounces the words and it's different from somebody else, to start really relaxing the hold of the definitions of reading, and to realize, like, the article I wrote about my daughter's reading, I can read, that was a revelation for her, because to her definition of reading was reading like an adult, like you're talking about, right? So, and that was one of the things I was careful with Michael, was not to me to be trying to convince him, oh, you're reading. It's completely theirs to own, and their definition of what when they consider themselves to be reading or to be a reader. You know what I mean? And to see me struggling was to say, like, the definition of a reader is not, I can read everything perfectly and fluently forever and ever, amen. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So there were just so many little components that make up that huge picture of reading, right? Like, from how other people define it, because absolutely at school. And then I would see my eldest, Joseph, who was reading while he was before he left school. But, the teachers I don't think they felt he was reading very fluently. They just had like those simple books, you know what I mean, for those younger grades. And I think he struggled more with those because he was bored or uninterested. Yet when he came home at night, he was reading video game walkthroughs, like 80-page printouts that we got him from the internet, right? That were written by teenagers and adults writing walkthroughs for these games. So, the malleability of the definition of reading became quickly apparent, but that's a huge piece of it, isn't it?
Yeah. And I guess, I mean, because again of the political climate that we're in right now in Quebec, people were talking about like illiterate, I forgot the term now, but like people who are illiterate, like they can read, but like they can't read like enough to
comprehension.
well, yeah, it's like, oh, shoot. Anyway, she, like, people who can barely read enough to fill out forms.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at some point really worried that, like, what if, like, she ends up being one of these people? And, like, part of me, especially now because she can read enough, like, part of me was like, what if that's it? And what if I don't know, but like some of the other unschoolers are at that point? I don't know. That was also like my question. I had to see it, like, and I kind of had to like take deep breaths and be like, okay, well, we'll see. And like, and also, I read a book, and I meant to look it up, but I haven't, about like dyslexics who like are famous. Well, I mean, it's about dyslexia, but like it talks a lot about some dyslexics who wrote novels, and then this guy who's dyslexic, so dyslexic that he can't read, but he's going to law school, and he just has a reader. So I was like, it was good for me to see those examples, to be like, well, if she can't figure out how to read, at least she can still do things like that now with the technology that there is. And like, and I think part of it, I guess, also, like, she still has a lot of trouble spelling, but she'll like, even without me suggesting it, she figured out a way to um compensate for that by using Google. She dictates things on Google, and then it's so it writes out the thing enough to know that if it like wrote a word that she mispronounced or whatever, like misheard the word that she pronounced, but then she doesn't have to struggle with the spelling. So like she figured out tools to help herself, and like sometimes when she can't pronounce words, she puts them into Google and looks for the definition and then presses the speaker button,
Mm-hmm.
so that Google will read it for her. So she figured out tools to help her with that. And so like that was also helpful for me to see, well, like she's figuring out things that work for her, and like that she can use even if she can never read fluently.
I know it goes back to that phrase, but I think that is such a huge point, because here we are again, individuals and how our brains work and how we figure things out and make the tools that work well for us. Whereas like with your brother in school, those who he was and how his brain worked was considered wrong and bad and deficient, and he absorbed those messages, and like you said, those are still they impacted deeply enough on him as a person that you can see them still playing out now, the effects of that playing out now. Whereas with unschooling, it's not about being a different way to becoming a perfect student. Even if it takes long, it's not about it being longer, whatever. It's about understanding that they are a unique person, who they are, and helping them learn and figure out how they mesh with the world, and finding the tools to help them accomplish what it is that they're trying to accomplish, so they're becoming more fully the person that they are, without or with as little baggage as we can pile on, like not pile on them, you know what I mean? So that these using these tools isn't about a negative, it's about them accomplishing what they want to, and they can do it this way and this way. I can use Google, and this can pronounce it for me. Oh, this can spell it for me, and off we go. And I do what I want to do. Like you were talking about the person in law school, right? Finding different tools, maybe I record lectures, maybe, there's more and more audiobooks now. Maybe there's so much, that Dragon naturally speaking software where you say things and it writes it out for you, etc. Yeah. Transcribes it. There's the right word. It's without feeling bad about ourselves, really, is the essence of it, right?
Yeah. And I mean, really, I wish that I had been more relaxed, because I do think that she still has like she still could feel my anxiety. And I really wish that I hadn't. And I feel like almost like, I knew all about this before, like, and I should have known better, but but I think, well,
Yeah,
that's what it is.
it really is like so much. I was okay, what episode? It's the episode a couple episodes ago with Maria, and she was talking about how really, for her the big thing was control, right? So maybe for you the big thing was reading, but there's going to be for everybody pretty much is going to be like the one big thing that encourages us to investigate, dive deep into ourselves and our self-awareness. It's our journey and realizing it's so much about us and our work to do, and how do we move through our anxiety? How do we dig into our anxiety and where it's coming from and how it's manifesting out in our, day-to-day lives? And that's all about our learning and growing, right? I mean, we can't avoid it. It because like you said, they still absorb it, even if we're trying not. We have to do the work ourselves, right, to move through it. There's really no other path through it.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's that's going away from the topic of reading, but I
Yeah.
think in general, like, because I started so early, and because I have a problem with like wanting everything to be perfect, I have like this guilt that, like, I should have known better, and I knew better, but I couldn't do better, because I think some of it is like, it's just, even if intellectually, like,
Yes.
you have to experience it, and you have to make mistakes so you can evolve. And there's no other way.
Yeah. There's such a huge difference, between the theory and seeing how it plays out in life and figuring it out. I talk so much about how, when you come to unschooling, giving it time, because there's one thing to read it and intellectually understand the philosophy and how it works, and it makes sense, right? But to see it playing out with the individuals in our lives, it's why I can do what we're at, episode number 133 here. I can talk to so many different people, and although the principles of unschooling are the same, the way it plays out in their lives is totally different and completely interesting. That's why I'm still excited and people are still listening 130 odd episodes in, because it's fascinating to see how it plays out. And still, there's nobody listening who it's playing out in their lives exactly the way you're describing it. You know what I mean?
Yes, definitely.
It's so interesting. Okay, so yeah, we probably should move beyond the reading question, but I wanted to pull it up because, reading was this one particular question, but it applies, the process of working through whatever concern or question, etc., is similar. Okay. Oh, another area people find challenging is technology, computers, the internet, cell phones. We were talking a little bit about how Linnea uses that, and other electronic devices they really are new to our culture, aren't they? And that can be really scary because change is scary for us. So I'd love to hear your experience around this particular topic.
Okay, well, that one was very easy for me. In that case, the theory really helped. But I've always been pretty computer savvy, and when I was 12 years old, my dad got an Apple IIc, yeah. And my brother and I played the Olympic Games, where you have to like press the space bar.
Yeah.
And so like I think he was excited about it too, and he got us that thing, and like we played freely on it, although like sometimes we play for hours, although I don't think it was hours the way that people play on this thing nowadays, because it was only this game, and like
Yeah.
you get bored after a while. But so, so I was always like, you know, as soon as I could afford to buy myself a computer, that was after university. But like even in university, I used the computer rooms a lot. I was there on there a lot, like emailing people and going on the internet, like at the beginning of the internet.
Yeah, yeah.
And then so, you know, I was always really into computers. I had more trouble with TV. Well, when Linnea was born, we didn't have a TV, and that was all my doing because I didn't want a TV in the house, and I kind of thought, you know, it was stupid or whatever. But Tobias is really into sports, so I kind of feel bad for him because, you know, although I mean he's also very sociable, so he went to sports bars to to watch the games. It might not have been such a bad thing, but like, so but so I was reading on, you know, those discussion boards, like Yahoo groups, and people were describing, like, you know, were asking the same questions as they're asking now, but 13 years ago, and probably even earlier than that. But and so, you know, I was reading, and at first I thought, you know, well, like at first I agreed with the people who were like, you know, it's bad for you and everything, but like as I was reading, I could see the point of view of the other people. And because Linnea was still a baby by that point, you know, like by the time I had read it, well, like by the time she was like a toddler, I was already convinced that I didn't want to restrict TV. And but I didn't go and buy a TV. I, like, you know, and she was still not really thing that wasn't like that she couldn't touch and play with basically. But like when she was about 15 months old, she refused to get dressed. And so I found like a little cartoon online, and I put it on the computer, and like while she was watching, I managed to get her dressed. So that's like her introduction to media. So I could get her attention long enough to get her dressed. And but you know, like she watched, and I got undressed, and then we went out, and like we did things, and like little by little, like I found programs here and there that she could watch. And so she'd watch, like I'd be online reading on my computer, and I'd like have a little window on it with her cartoons, and that's like for like a year about, that's how we watched, even more than a year, I think. You know, I like split the screen in two, and she watched with me while I was reading. And but we went to the park, and we did lots of other things. It wasn't like we were on there for that long, because she wasn't interested in it for that long at this point. And then it evolved from there. Like she really liked watching some programs, and then she'd want to, like, you know, like we watched Blue's Clues, and so she wanted to draw. And then we watched like Dora and Diego, and she wanted to dress up as like Diego and go rescue animals in the apartment. And like, so I made her lots of costumes based on the shows she was watching, because she always wanted to dress up as something. um and um and then, you know, like she was, and then like I introduced her to computer games, because I thought computer games were awesome. And I was never really a gamer, but I had a boyfriend at one point that like was really into video games, and he was somebody who like was really well read and really intelligent, but he was really into video games to, like, you know, to have fun. And like, so he got into video games, and I couldn't really never play them because I'm not that skilled, but I always thought they were great, you know, fun and and educational, even the ones that aren't made educational.
Yeah.
So I introduced her to video games, but she wasn't really into it for you know, because I introduced her to video games like when she was 3. She wasn't really into them for that long. And then gradually, like, you know, she watched a lot of shows, and like while playing or bouncing on a trampoline, or like or like playing with animals or whatever. But and then you know, like some of her friends were into Minecraft, and she got into Minecraft, but that was maybe she was 7 or 8. And then she started like playing. So at first she played Minecraft when he had play dates, and then she started using Skype so she could play Minecraft with them. And so and then like oh, another thing I wanted to say was like, so I've always really been into computers. So we travel a lot, but every time we travel, I'd bring my computer. And then when the girls had their computer, I'd bring their computers too. So we have always traveled with like our electronics because I think it's important for them to have their electronics wherever we go. And and then Linnea was really into drawing, and she watched YouTube like draw
Yeah.
speed drawings.
Hmm.
And and she found well, in the speed drawings, a lot of the people use paint tool Sai, so I got her paint tool Sai, and then I got her a tablet so that she could draw more precisely. And so now she's really into drawing with her tablet, and she spends hours a day drawing on her tablet. And the thing that I realize now is like, so people, I mean, we still, she's very sociable, and and we're pretty active. We like going out to do stuff, but she can spend hours on her computer drawing, and reading on DeviantArt, like making up characters and talking to people. And so she's on her computer a lot when we're not busy somewhere else. And I actually like make sure that we get big chunks of time when she has time to be on her computer, because she needs that time to draw, to think about her drawings, to look at other people's drawing. I mean, it's part of her creative process. And I realized that, like, the times when I worry because she's on her computer too much, and it's not like the screen time that bothers me. It's the like, she's inactive and she's just sitting there, and I'm worried like she probably should go and like just get a break. But like I remind myself that that's her part of her process. Like that's part, it's like there's a huge amount of learning going on, and like I can't just be like limiting her even to like like I can't limit her to 1 hour, and sometimes I can't even limit it to 3 hours. Or I mean, not that I want to limit it, but like when I start being like, oh my god, she's been like, we've been at home for 3 days, and like she barely like went out for a walk. um so yeah, and that's the thing that I see a lot of parents worrying about, is like what you call screen time. And I think if you see your computer in front of the screen and you don't see what they're doing
Hmm.
with that screen, then yeah, you don't see, you're not seeing the really rich things that I have that are happening, and it's so limiting. and yeah, so I mean, for me, it hasn't been a problem. But I always try, like when I see people, I like talk really enthusiastically about what she's doing and how it's great, and she's learning so much from her time on the computer. And my Xenia, who's 9, she was never really like, well, I mean, she watches a lot of shows on her computer, but she gets a lot of inspiration from YouTube. But so Xenia, as a little child, like would never stay in front of the TV. Sometimes I wanted her to like, leave me 5 minutes alone, but she would like, after 5 minutes, she'd go away, get away from the screen. So like, she wasn't that interested in them. But now she's really into Littlest Pet Shops, those little figurines, and
Yeah, yeah.
she likes customizing customizing them. And it's hard with my accent. And so she like, she'll watch YouTube for a while and get an inspiration and go get her paints, or and like and customize a pet shop, or she'll get like some craft things and go make some accessory for her LPS, like. And that's how she gets her inspiration too. So again, like, it's just a very, very useful tool.
It's so true. It's so important to see what they're doing there. Like, an artist years ago would be sitting around with their sketchbook for hours and hours, sketching and playing with their drawing that way. It's just another tool. that Linnea can use for drawing, right? And her community is there. Discuss she can get that is something that the internet has brought to us, that we can find people who are as passionate and as excited about something that we're interested in, that it's not a big enough thing that you would find a dozen people geographically near you who are just as excited as you, right?
Yeah.
So I think
Yes.
that we can it's an opportunity to connect and really dive into the things that we're passionate and interested and excited about. It's really great. But like you said, you're not going to see that if you just think they're sitting in front of a screen, right? You're not going to see all the interesting and different things that they're getting into and enjoying through that. It's such a versatile tool, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And the same thing, when you think about your other daughter doing
Kenya.
costuming, yeah, and all those other things, and and those same kind of skills and that same interest they would pursue through other things 20-30 years ago. Maybe it was through dolls, right? And hopefully finding some other kids even a bit older who are still interested in sewing clothes for their dolls, making accessories, all that kind of stuff. So it's not like kids are still doing what humans do, right? They're just using the new tools that happen to be part of our culture now to pursue them. It's not like, oh my gosh, children aren't doing what they used to do. We have this whole, generation of screen addicted children who, it's not. They're just using these tools to do the same kind of things children always do when they have the freedom to dive into and pursue the things that they're interested in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And I think, I mean, like at first, when I was like looking up crafts and stuff, I'd go to the library and get books. But then I realized, when like that I could find all of that and better on the internet.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they would have done if they had lived before the internet, is go to the library. But this is like much more useful. I mean, not like, it's just everything is there and you can find so many more things than, because rather than being limited to your local library.
Yeah,
That
and
doesn't have
plus
it.
you find people that way too, right? And you connect with
Yeah.
other people versus just you and the book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have you mentioned trilingual, you guys. And you travel a lot, like even just in your stories. Oh, we were in Australia and we were here and then we came. Oh, okay, oh, that's one. And so I definitely wanted to touch on those topics. And when we were chatting before, like emailing before the call, it was really interesting that you mentioned those topics together, because at first I was thinking, oh, they travel and they speak lots of languages. I knew because you were translating to French for mine, so I knew at least you were very fluent in two. But anyway, so now I could imagine when you mentioned it that you're traveling and there's different languages where you're traveling to, but it seemed like it was a little bit bigger than that. So I would be really interested to hear how you see travel and languages weaving into your lives, and what the joys and the challenges are of all that.
Okay, so
Okay.
well, they they go together in my mind, especially because the first thing that I read about unschooling was in that book that I told you about attachment
Mm-hmm.
attachment parenting. Well, like raising your child differently. It's called in French.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
French book, and it was like the experience. It was the experience of a family who was unschooling in France, and they were bilingual or trilingual. They were like, the mom was Spanish and the dad was French. I don't, anyway, but like,
Mhm.
so they spoke different languages, and they traveled, you know, and they like, she mentioned traveling to, you know, learn history. Like they went to Rome, and they went, and that's how they learned about history. And you know, and so my dad lives in New Caledonia, which is a French territory off the coast of Australia. And I grew up partly in Tahiti, like because I moved there with my parents from France. And my brother used to live in Tahiti, but now lives in New Caledonia. And Tobias is German. His parents are still in Germany. My mom lives in France, and and I traveled a lot as well. I like when I was, well, after I moved to Tahiti, I went to the US to study. So I have lots of friends in the US, and then I moved back. Then I spent a semester abroad in Argentina. And like, so I have friends, and like, and I lived in China as well. So anyway, I have friends all over the world. And and family all over, like, you know, in different parts of the world too. um and in parts of the world that don't speak, where they don't speak English. So anyway, like, in my mind, when I read that story, I was like, this is perfect. Like, this is exactly what I want for my kids. Like, I don't want to send them to school because I want to enjoy them. And I can, like, make their life rich by, you know, like, speaking all the languages that we speak anyway. And Tobias is, you know, speaks a lot of languages too. And we're both really into languages. So it was like how I saw that. I was like, this is perfect, this is what we should do. So, you know, for me, unschooling was like having fun with the kids while traveling and speaking lots of languages. So like, because I like, and you know, I mean, it's part of our life anyway, and we want to, we can afford it. And we, you know, because we couldn't afford it, we kind of feel bad, like, if we don't go see our family at least once a year. Well, sometimes less, but like, you know, we try to go see them often. And like, so it's part of our lives. And it's like, um it's something that to me was like, well, this is it, this is what it's going to be like. But then you know, when traveling with children isn't always easy. It's very different from traveling on your own. And so I mean, um and and you know, the children don't always, I mean, my girls, because they're used to it, like traveling, but sometimes they like being home too. And I think, you know, part of it was realizing, although I never wanted to travel full time, but part of it was realizing that there has to be a balance. And that, like, we have to, like, and that I have to listen to them too, and that I have to um well, like, we need to balance the needs of everybody. And like, even when we're traveling, I try to not go see lots of places, like, and you know, when they were really little, we'd travel and then go to the playground. And that's all we saw in the city, were like lots of playgrounds.
Yeah.
And that was okay with me, because I've traveled a lot. I don't feel like I have to go to places and do all the touristy stuff or whatever. I'll
Mhm.
just follow my kids' leads. And I think it's like a great way, like a great new way of seeing a country. And you know, you meet kids at the playground, and so that's like a great way of, you know, um, discovering a new culture. And like, sometimes we even one time we were traveling in New Zealand, and there was we were staying in a place, in a village, like a little city, for 5 days, and they had the school fair, and we went to the school fair. And then Senya, who was 8 at the time, met a 5-year-old, and like, she ended up playing with her. And then her grandparents, well, her mom and her grandparents were there, and they invited us over to their house. And so for the next like 2 days, we hung out with that
Ah,
family from New Zealand. And like, you know, we like that happens when you like travel just for like, but like, you know, then really take the kid, well, travel for the kids, I want to say. Like, well, I mean, we traveled for us because we wanted to see New
Mhm.
Zealand, but then like we did things that the kids enjoyed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that
And
that is that most they were pretty good and happy to travel, and for you the biggest thing was just incorporating their interests wherever you were, right? And considering what it is
yeah,
they wanted to do. And then
yeah. So yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
um, I guess yes, that was so. Sometimes I've been I've been not excited about traveling because it takes a lot of work from me, like,
Mhm.
but and part of me, because it's my part of it, is like I feel like this is part of our unschooling, and so I I want to say I force myself, but like, I make myself get out of my comfort zone and say, okay, now we're going to do this trip, we have to go see the grandparents, and like then we can stop there on the way. And so like some of it is like the like I feel like I need to let go. Well, I couldn't let go of traveling, but I feel okay, no. Let's start again. um
I like when you're talking about your comfort zones, right? Because
yeah, yes,
it feels like it would be something that you'd need to play with, and that would change over time, like what people are getting out of the experience of traveling. And yeah, there's part of, I feel like this time I want to stretch my comfort zone and, like you said, force myself to do this because I know I'm going to enjoy the experience in the end. But also, like you were saying, you guys are also enjoying your home time as well. And then it was so interesting when you said this was part of how you were defining unschooling for your family. And, the question of, is that going to change over time? And yeah, it's
yeah.
a really interesting lens to look through life at.
I guess what I wanted to say was the yeah, I like there have been times when it was me who was fed up with traveling,
Hmm.
and I had to be like, okay, well, I want to stop traveling for a while, but then uh but be okay with that, because it was so like ingrained in me that this was our traveling, this was our unschooling, that like I had to be like, well, it's okay, I mean, we do lots of things when we're not traveling anyway.
Yeah.
And I mean, we only travel maybe 3 months out of the year. Sometimes, a month here and 2 months there, or sometime in a chunk of 3 months, or maybe 4 months if put all the travels together. But like
Yeah.
so there's like still 10 months, like yeah, something like 10 months out of the year when we're home and the girls are doing regular activities and stuff. But like, and so I have to remind myself that it's okay, like it's okay to like have a normal life. and
Yeah. Yeah.
and like they're getting lots of things too, and also to be like, well, we have to, I want to um take that into consideration too, like not travel too much so that they can have time at home, relaxed, doing like regular activities, seeing their friends regularly. And
Uh-huh.
especially now that they're getting older. And Xenia, my 9-year-old, she likes traveling, but she really likes being home more than Linnea, because she wants to have all her craft supplies so she can do stuff,
Yeah.
and it's not as easy. So like the like being okay with being like, well, we don't have to travel that much. But like the girls also want to go see their cousins, and like, so there's this, we all want like a like it's hard for all of us, I think, to balance this like desire to travel with desire to be home and relax.
Oh, that's such a great point too, because um and it's such a helpful thing for everybody at all ages to try and figure out, what is it that I want to do, and want to do now, that push and pull of different interests, of comfort zones, of all those different things, just really challenges us and our self-awareness, right? We kind of have to figure that out and figure out what it is that we're wanting, in that moment. And even like the push and pull of wanting to travel and wanting to see families and having that part of their lives, along with, having your craft supplies and your good friends close at hand and all those things. So it's a great way to, it really brings those into focus, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Different challenges.
Yeah, and so to talk about the other aspect, the languages
Oh yeah.
aspect, so I started out speaking English to Linnea because at the time we were living in Belgium, and I didn't know where we would end up, and I wanted her to be fluent in English, and Tobias spoke German to her. And Tobias and I've always spoken French together, so that's how the trilingual thing was. But and then we moved to Montreal, and I figured, she'll speak French, but like she ended up not really understand. Like we met a lot of English speakers when we first moved to Montreal, and so she didn't speak French that well for a long time, and I don't even know if she understood it, but she understood German and she spoke some German. And then my mom and my brother and his daughter came to visit, and she picked up French very fast. And then we had a French neighbor who came over to play, French speaking neighbor who came over to play. So like she picked up French, but she doesn't speak it. She speaks it with a tiny accent, like English accent, but she speaks it pretty well. And she really wants to, Linnea, like be better at French. So like now that she's she's always made efforts to speak, and like she was really enthusiastic about it. And so like every time we go to see our family in France or in Germany, she tries to speak French or German. And then like when like last year she started taking conversation classes with a German tutor, and she speaks to my mom half an hour a week in French, so like to keep up her French. And then we were in France recently, and they went to a democratic school for 2 months because Linnea wanted to practice her French, and so, which was great because like she hung out with people for 2 months and her French improved a lot. So that was great. So with Linnea, like the languages part is totally like completely taking off, and it's great. And like even though like she speaks English better than the other two, like she's getting there and she wants to get there. But Xenia Xenia is really not interested. Like she is not interested in like learning other languages, and she was really fluent in French because we had au pairs from France when she was little.
Mm-hmm.
But then the au pairs left. Well, like the au pair that we had left, and I don't know if it's that or if her language started, like her English started improving like rapidly, and her French was kind of left behind. But then she stopped wanting to speak French, and it was like from that point on, she was about 4. Like she's been like really resistant to speaking French. I mean, but she'll speak it when she's very social. So when we're in France, she speaks French to people who don't speak a word of English. But if she knows that the person is speaking English, then she'll speak English to her. And so the traveling helps because we go to places where she has to. I mean, she doesn't have to. She could, and I wouldn't force her to, but like she wants to because because she wants, like, her desire to interact with people is stronger than her desire to not to only speak English. But that's something that I have to let go too, of like, the we're trilingual thing. Like I have to be like, well, it's okay. You can just be like, you can just speak English. You'll get by fine. And like and that's that. But yeah, that's why I think it's another balance. And like for me it's this in the same category as travel, because it was like in my big vision of unschooling. It
Mm-hmm.
was a big part of it, and now we're at the point where when I'm like, well, maybe it won't be a part of her unschooling, but it's gonna be
Yeah.
okay.
I really think that's such a big piece of it, because when we first learn about unschooling and we envision kind of what our life is going to be like, and that's part of the process of deciding that this is something you want to do, right? I mean, you have to think about, how do I think it's going to play out? How do I see it playing out, to even decide it's a choice you want to try. But yeah, reconciling, it's not even so much that you have expectations, like, you're not expecting that they will all speak, three languages and enjoy multiple languages and just have an interest in that. But still, it's part of that just movie in our head that has played. This is how it's going to kind of play out in our lives. And we need to take that time to come to terms with just teasing out what was our kind of dreams and
Yeah.
and the children and the life that we actually have, and reminding ourselves how cool the life we have is, and being grateful for that. And even sometimes it's just taking the moment to pick out all the good things. I know so often when I was getting caught up in the swirl of things and starting to worry about things, and things weren't going the way that I was hoping they would go, you know what I mean? To stop and hang out with my kids and see the reality of my kids every day, and to realize, oh, this is good too. This is cool too. And to get really happy, to get to a good place with that, helped me process away, because those dreams were cool too, but this is just as cool. And when you can get in there, sometimes it's even cooler, you know what I mean? Because these are real people, and these are real people that we love, and the things that they are choosing are all awesome, even if they're different than what I was kind of envisioning. But again, it's our work to do. It's not simple, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely not simple.
Definitely not simple.
But it's, yeah, and I feel like, this is like, if I don't do this work, then we're not gonna have the relationship that I want to have. And if I don't let go of these things, it's going to influence our relationship, and that's not what I want.
Yeah, it's disconnecting, isn't it? Because we keep almost we keep trying to pull them, even if we don't know that we're actively doing it, but our energy, our reactions, our conversations, it's like we are subtly trying to pull them closer to the path that we're envisioning. And that's disconnecting. To do the work to realize that the connection with them is more important, and that's ultimately our main goal, is what keeps bringing us back to them, and to connecting with them, and to enjoying whatever they find interesting, the things they want to do, and not being stressed about the things that they don't want to do. If they don't want to speak French, unless they're in a situation where that's their only option, if they want to communicate. Like you said, it's not a requirement, but these situations come up. But then it's like, okay, I got to make sure I'm not creating those situations because I want her to make those choices, right? Not artificially creating them, but saying, okay, they come up once in a while, organically, rather than manufactured. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it was like our recent trip to Paris, where they went to a democratic school. I was talking about it with Linnea, and like she doesn't feel comfortable traveling by herself yet, and which is another thing. Like if she wants to travel, and we can't now, like now that she's older, like I traveled when I was pretty young too, and I'd be okay with her letting do that. But right now she's not, and so I felt like like, like I had to come with her, and so Xenia had to come with us. But Xenia was excited to go to Paris because it's Paris,
Yeah.
because she's heard about it. And so that worked well. And the democratic school, originally Linnea was the only one who was supposed to go there so she could speak French. And then Xenia went and thought, oh my God, it's so cool. There are so many people. And she found teenagers who spoke English. And of course, they were so happy to have somebody that they could practice English with. So, it worked out. But then there were other little kids who couldn't speak English, so she ended up speaking French with them anyway. But I felt like, okay, well, like she totally chose that, and then like it worked out, and that she also got to use some of her French, but it was like me pushing her.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Okay, well, I think we've talked about the challenges on your unschooling journey for a while now. So I would like to pull it back to asking you what your favorite thing about your unschooling lifestyle is right now.
My favorite thing is having the time to, just having time to letting it all unfold, I think, and not to feel pressure. Though, I mean, like, I still like have my own internal pressure, but like I can let it go and work on it. But the kids don't have any pressure. And I see the school bus go like pass by my window every day at 7 or 30, and every day I'm so grateful that they don't have to be up. They're never up at 7:30. They have the time to sleep as long as they want, and they have time to be at home and like on their doing their own things, like crafting as much as they want and drawing as much as they want, and really exploring their passions fully. and yeah.
The time. Yeah.
Yeah, the time. Yeah.
And I love the way you described it, unfolding.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the word that for me reminds me that to release the expectations, that I don't want to try and control, and even again subtly try to control where they're going. But their lives are unfolding, and it's so exciting to see where they take them, where they go, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, Bea. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry I made you dive into some of those areas, but it's really interesting stuff, and it's all part of the journey. It's amazing, but it's not simple, right?
Yeah, well, no, that's the thing about unschooling. I get very, very excited about lots of things, and I get also very, nervous about a lot of things. So and I think it's good to talk about all of that.
Exactly. No, I love that. Thank you so much for doing that with me. So where is the best place for people to connect with you online if they'd like to get in touch?
I'm on Facebook a lot. I don't post almost at all anymore, but you can get in touch with me there. And I'm trying to think. I'm on, Facebook, I guess. Otherwise, I have. And I have a blog, but I haven't updated it very much lately. But I used to update it a lot, so it has our journey from like the time Bea was until she was until last year, and maybe longer if I updated it again.
Yeah. No, exactly. I'd love to share links to those blogs, because you have a French one too, don't you?
Yeah, I stopped updating that one a long time ago.
Yeah.
So yes,
but it's still there, right?
No, yes, the one I have a blog where I post about our life, but I also have the blog of translations where I posted your translations. That's right. Yes.
Yeah, we will put all that stuff in the show notes for people. Thanks again so much, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.